Alright, yesterday we left off on equipment wiring method. This is for the commercial garage. General purpose electrical equipment installed 12 feet above the floor, above the grate floor. So if you got 12 feet off the floor, like the lighting and everything, if it's high enough, you can use regular fluorescence. It doesn't have to be anything. Same thing in the fuel dispenser. So you get above 12 feet, you can use general lighting. Don't have to be sealed for a Class 1 division. So Class 1 location equipment within 18 inches of the floor. Again, in a commercial garage, you can use EMT. Remember, you can use EMT in a garage. All the outlets will be GFI protected. And then generators and motors must be enclosed. Aircraft hangars. So areas within an aircraft hangar are classified based on the proximity of the aircraft. So it's everything's within the proximity of the aircraft. So here is the only thing that's going to be covered, even though this whole area is covered in one big room where we got a hangar or whatever. It's only around where the fuels or the engines are at, where fuel might be located. Okay, so even though the fuel's in an airplane, the fuel is in the wings, we still have an engine in the back. Okay, fuel has to get to that. So areas within the aircraft hangar are classified based on the proximity of the aircraft. The areas where the fuel compartments and other fuel carry components of the aircraft are located are the principal concern. See figure 16.5, that's 16.5 up on the board. In the code, regulations for wiring methods. So again, we're only looking, so wherever we have, so 5 feet out of the wing, 5 feet above the wing, down to the floor, 18 inches. Okay, here we go 5 feet out, and then 18 inches. Once we're outside that 5 foot mark of the wings, and then it's only 18 inches wide because the fumes are thicker than air, so they're going to sink to the bottom. If you have a pit, so this in yellow here would be a Class 1 Division 2. We have a pit. That pit would be a Class 1 Division 1. Okay, because the fumes would sink down to the pit, especially if it's not ventilated. Especially if it's not ventilated. If it's ventilated, and the ventilation and the authority having jurisdiction says, yes, you got 6 turns of air per hour, or whatever it may be, now it turns it into a Class 1 Division 2. But if it is not ventilated, and then it's a Class 1 Division 1. Class 1 Division 1, sorry. So the floor space within the hangar from grade up 18 inches is considered a Class 1 Division 2. Okay, so you get around where the fuel's at, it is also a Class 1 Division 2. Any electrical equipment capable of arcing or generating sparks must be totally enclosed if located within 10 feet above the wing or engine. Okay, so 10 feet above the wing or engine, because we have the 5 feet going above, must be enclosed. It says rooms adjacent to the hangar are considered non-hazardous. General purpose wiring can be used in those areas. Okay. Say I got a big hangar and the plane fits in the middle, and I got, say, 30 feet from here to here and 30 feet from the edge of the wing to the edge of the wall. Okay, so I only have to go out 5 feet, and then it's 18 inches underneath that's considered. So if I'm far enough from the wing, and that airplane will never get close to the edge, and then I can have the edge as a general wiring area. Okay, but in a hangar, guess what? They can bring a pane in and say, hey, scoot it over there because we're going to bring a second one in. So always have to be careful on how you wire it, because you just can't say, well, the plane's going to be in the middle. Yeah, the plane may be in the middle now, but it may not be in the middle later. Or it's big enough, somebody else moves in and they bring in 2 or 3 planes. Who knows? So you have to be very careful when you're doing it the first time. Motor fuel dispensing. So a motor fuel dispensing location is an area where you put fuel. Okay, going back to that last one. Okay, if there's in this hangar, if there's an area that has a fuel dispensing area, well, guess what? Around that fuel pump, you have to consider that area is also going to be, now it goes into a Class 1 Division 1, just like we have it. So if it's enclosed within the room, guess what? You can have that whole room being a Class 1 Division 1, Class 1 Division 2. Okay, so depending how close you are to the dispensing unit, or if they're storing barrels of fuel, okay, around those barrels would be a Class 1 Division 1. So you always have to find out what they got, because that can change when it comes into fuels or flammable liquids that they're storing. They got an area set up. Okay, yeah, this is going to be our storage area where we can keep a fuel locked down, for jet fuel or whatever they want. So yes, you have to do that. So the location where fuel is transferred from dispensing pumps to a fuel tank are discussed in the code in Article 514. I forgot to say, on the airplanes, on the aircraft hangars is covered in Article 513. And fuel dispensing is 514. Motor fuel dispensing facilities. The area where the pump is located is hazardous due to flammable liquids and vapors present. Okay, so we have to be very careful, because this here would be a Class 1. So these nozzles would be a Class 1 Division 2. So wherever this pump is at, all this in white is a Class 1 Division 1. We get 18 inches out, all the way around it, 20 feet. That is all considered a Division Class 1, Division 2. The pump itself, a Class 1, Division 2. It says outdoor areas within 20 feet horizontally and 18 inches vertically of the fuel dispensing pumps are Class 1, Division 2, or Zone 2 areas. In addition, the area around each underground tank, pipe 10 feet horizontally, 18 inches above grade, is also considered a Class 1 Division 2. Further, wiring equipment located below grade of the Class 1 Division 2 locations is classified as a Class 1 Division 1. So if I got conduits going underground and coming across, let's see the next picture. No, they don't have it. Oh, here it is. Okay. So these conduits down here in the ground, that's Class 1 Division 1. Okay. Once it comes above the ground, 18 inches. Tank pipes horizontally and 18 inches above grade is also considered Class 1 Division 2. Furthermore, wiring and equipment located below grade of a Class 1 Division 2 location is classified as a Class 1 Division 1. Okay, so that means is when you're going from the ground up, you're going from a Class 1 to a Class, Division. You're going from a Division 1 to a Division 2, still Class 1. So you have to have seals within 18 inches. Always remember, you have to have seals within 18 inches. Go back to the last picture. Okay, so always remember is your fuel pumps is all a Class 1, Division 1. Okay, so it says unit nozzles and hoses are Class 1. So the unit, it's a whole unit as one. So when you come out of the ground, you're coming out of a Class 1 Division 1 to a Class 1 Division 1. But you also have to have, when you're coming with your connections, you're going to have the seal coming out of the ground. So if you're coming up within the inside, you're going to have the seal coming out. I've done a gas pump, and they made sure we had seals everywhere. And then when we brought the power from here to our junction box, we had a seal going out. So our junction box, where we made our connections, we had a seal with the wires coming in, and we had a seal with the wires going out. So in case there was a problem within that seal coming out, it wasn't going to affect anything. Fuel Facility Section 514.2. Locations where gasoline or other volatile flammable liquids are liquefied. Flammable gases are transferred to fuel tanks of self-propelled vehicles or approved containers. So if you got a barrel that's approved and you got a little hand crank that you're getting fuel out, guess what? That is considered a fuel dispensing. Even though there's no electricity going to it, it's still a fuel dispensing. That's approved container. Okay, so you can have those. I've seen them where they have them and they roll them out and they, you know, and they fill up things. Motor fuel dispensing facility, explosion-proof junction boxes at dispensers, sealed fittings for every conduit run connected to the dispenser. This says up into including point where the equipment surfaces from the grade beneath the grade level. Spaces within the gas dispenser itself considered a Class 1 Division 1. For overhead fuel dispensing pumps, the space within 18 inches horizontally in all directions from the dispensing unit is classified as Division 1, Class 1 Division 2. The dispensing using nozzle and hose is considered a Division 1. So remember, the hose and everything else is a Division 1, Class 1 Division 1. 18 inches around and 20 feet horizontal from the pump itself is a Class 1 Division 2. Okay. If we're coming up to a light pole, here's a light pole, here's your pipe coming up, 18 inches above, we got to put a seal in, because here's the 18 inches, so underground is a Class 1 Division 1. Above ground is a Class 1 Division 2. Okay, so once we go from one division to another division, okay, we have to put a seal, and we have to have a seal within 18 inches. Then it's going into the light pole. If you have lights like a gas station and it has a canopy over that's got a closed canopy up on top and it has lights in it. So again, when we start having those, then the lights change depending on the proximity to the pumps. Okay, here, let's say this is inside the building. This is inside the building. So this panel board is a regular panel board like the ones we have in the yard. So it's a regular panel board. It's indoors. But it's going in the ground and it's going out to the pumps. Okay, so because it's going in the ground, it changes its classification. Coming out from here up, it may be EMT. We had it where we had the conduits. It didn't come up inside the building, they came up outside the building. So what we had is we had pipes coming up, coming out of the ground, and we poked into the building about a foot above ground. So we came out of the ground, we put our seals, we put an LB, and we went straight into the panel. Then straight inside, and then went to the panel. Then we had another. It's still, because we're still at a Class 1 Division 2, and then when we came through, we put a seal on the other side. So we want to make sure if something happened inside the store, it didn't get into that conduit and go outside. So we sealed it as we came through the hole, through the wall, and then we put another seal, and then we changed over and went into the panel. So we had a seal coming up, LB'd into the building, then we had another seal, and then we went into the panel. And once we had the panel was just a regular indoor panel, surface mounted panel board. When making electrical repairs at the service pump, power to the pump must be disconnected. All controls and circuit breakers must be open and hot neutral conductors. Okay, so disconnected, what does it mean? You take the wires off the breaker. You take the wires off the breaker. You know, this is one thing I've learned over time working on things, that just because you turn it off and put a tag on, doesn't mean that somebody else ain't going to turn it on. Because there's other people that ain't got a clue and they just say, hey, breaker's off. Why is it off? You know, bother looking at the tag. And it's happened to me a couple times. So what I always do, if I'm working on an area and I want to have something off, I'm turning circuits off to work on the circuits. What I do is I take the cover off and disconnect the wires off the breakers. That way I still put my tag on, and if somebody goes in there, turns the breakers on, it's not going to affect me. Why? Because I disconnected the wires off the breakers. Well, when you're working with a pump, the last thing you want is there to be static or anything. Get on that, go back outside, you create a spark, and boom, it's off. So the best thing to do is disconnect the wires off. Disconnect the wires off. When you're working on pumps, one thing you have to be careful with is always make sure you're grounding yourself off. You know, if you go to the vehicle to go get something, or you sit down in the vehicle, you always have to remember is now you can pick up some static. You go back and you create a spark, and you're around these fumes, you can create something. So always have to be careful with it. Everything has to be properly grounded. You know, when you're touch something, ground yourself off. Walk over to the cot, touch the seal column, whatever it may be, before you start working on these pumps. It says, when making electrical repairs at the service pump, power to the pumps must be disconnected. Disconnected. That means not turning off. That means disconnected. The wire is disconnected. Not only the neutral, not only the hots, neutrals also. All controlled circuit breakers must be open, both hot and neutral conductors. This eliminates any hazard that would present in the neutral or the hot wires were reversed. Also, junction boxes at dispensers must be explosion proof. That's what we're talking about here. So, when you have a thing that turns off, we had, where we came in, and let me read a little bit more here. It says a seal fitting. I'll get to the thing. Seal feeding is needed for conduit runs connected to the dispenser or sealing. Sealing fittings must be first fitted in the conduit after it exits below the grade. So again, when it exits below the grade, you got to have the seal fittings. An additional seal fitting is needed when the conduit crosses the boundaries of the Class 1 area. Conduit supplies. Okay, so again, when I was talking about earlier, I'm coming in here, and let's say I'm going, my pipes are coming over here, and then I'm coming this way. This is outside the building, this is inside the building. Okay, reverse. So let's say the panel is on the inside. When I LB in, right on the inside I had another fitting. Okay, right on the other side I had another fitting. Why? Because if something happens inside, I don't want it going outside through the conduit, exiting the building through the conduit. So I used rigid all the way up into the building, had another seal, so there was no problem between this seal and the other seal, so it was always sealed, and then I came up. It's not something I designed, that's what was on the blueprints, and this is the way they wanted it. There was a comment on it that the authority having jurisdiction, that's the way they wanted it. It was an add-on, so you could have a comment on it, and then down at the box it had a comment, and then where everybody assigned and agreed to it. So always have to remember is if you have a question about something, the best person to ask is the authority having jurisdiction. Why? He's the one that's got to say yes or no. You know, you don't go to your boss and say, well, you know, hey, can I do it this way? And the boss says, yeah, go ahead. And then the inspector shows up, well, that's not the way it's supposed to be done. Well, my boss says, okay, it don't matter what your boss says, it's what I say. So always remember that. Inspector, if you have a question about something, ask the inspector. Anytime I always get inspector's phone number. If I have questions, I want to ask him. You know, if I can find out when the inspector's going to be around, trying to meet up with the inspector, and then what is he looking for? And what is he looking for? What does he want to see? Guess what? It changes between inspectors because different inspectors have different interpretation. My interpretation may not mean the same thing that the inspector has. Alright, code alert, and this is what I was talking about. Disconnect for each suspension device during periods of maintenance and service. Article 514.13, disconnects can be other than inside or adjacent to dispensing pumps, able to be locked in the open position. We were using disconnects. Everything that we were using was single phase, so we were using 3-phase disconnects, and that neutral was on the disconnect. So that way when we turned that disconnect off, we were also breaking that neutral off. The other is we had shunt trip breakers, and the shunt trip went over to a coil. It had the breakers. The panel was in 2 divisions, so we had part of the panel that was always hot, and then we had a breaker with a shunt trip on it, had wires coming out, and it went out to the switch, and then the neutral came in through that because we used a 3-pole breaker. And everybody's seen those big red buttons at a gas station that's outside. Well, that's what cuts power off to the gas pump. So there's something happened and you tap turn, you go in there and it shuts and it disconnects all wires. And it disconnects all wires going to the pumps, hots and neutrals. Everything we're using was single phase, so we use a three-pole breaker. We have 2 hots and a neutral in it. Shut trip. So when you hit that red button, it turns that breaker off. And then that way, and the breaker was in 2 forms. This was always hot, and the bottom part was fed off that shut trip breaker. And had 2 wires going to the inside. An additional ceiling fin is needed when the conduit crosses the boundaries. Okay, I read that. It says conduit supplying light fixtures, poles, light signs within the hazard areas must be sealed at both ends. Okay, so it must be sealed at both ends. Let me get back to the picture. Okay, so it's going on light, so it must be sealed here. It's going underground. Guess what? When it comes up to the other side, it's got to be sealed also. Always remember is when it goes in the ground, when it comes up out of this ground, it has to be sealed, no matter where it's at. Because the ground is a Class 1, Division 1. So once you break it, you have to have it sealed, both ends. Because guess what? If it's going to the ground, you're going to have both ends. You're going to have 2 ends. I'll get back to that in a bit. Light fixtures located less than 12 feet above grade must be totally enclosed or sealed. So again, if it's 12 feet or less, it's got to be enclosed and sealed. You get above 12 feet, you got general lighting. For most part, because a canopy in a gas station, unless it's an enclosed gas station, but you have a canopy, it's still exposed to the elements, so now the fixture itself has to be either watertight, or it has to be approved for location. There we go. So it has to be approved for a location where it's at. So most times, because it is outside, it will be sealed, whether it's fluorescent, LED, or HID. Spray dipping and coating. It's a spray dipping and coating process often involves paint, solvents, and thinners and other flammable substances in such areas. Not only are the vapors and mist ignitable, but the residue, dust, and similar deposits are also dangerous fire hazards. Article 516 covers sprays, applications, dipping, coating, and printing process using flammable combustible materials. And the code specifies the wiring methods, materials to be used in those areas. Okay, so we have different areas. Manufacturers determine the classification process and the amount of hazard the material present must be considered. The ventilation system also affects the classifications, as does the building design. The general discussion in this text is an introduction to the wiring requirements in the area. When working with process applications, consult the codes for specific conditions and consult with the authority having jurisdiction. So dipping tanks. Always remember with a dipping tank, okay, here's our conveyor that's bringing something in. So as soon as it enters, this is the point at which the object is no longer vapors. So if this is the area where the vapors end, so we got to go 5 feet out. Okay, and then from where it ends, this is a Class 1, Division 1. So this orange is a Class 1, Division 1. Inside the dipping tank, and they call it Zone 0. Why? Because that's where your main problem's at. So that's why it's red. But it's still a Class 1, Division 1. Still a Class 1, Division 1. They just call it Zone 0. So all of this, so we have to go from the tank, come out, and we're going to go, it says, here's the tank, it ends here, we go 5 feet, and then 3 feet would be a Class 1 Division 2, and then 20 feet out. Okay, so from here, this is the portion, right here is the portion, so here's the dipping tank, this is the breaking point, we go 5 feet, 5 feet from there, we go 5 feet from the breaking point, and then 20 feet horizontal. and then this would be a Class 1 Division 2. Okay, 5 feet above it, and then 3 feet. Okay, so 5 feet above the level of the fluid, whatever you're using, 5 feet above the level of the fluid, not above the tank, the level of the fluid. So there it is right there. Go 5 feet above that, and then 3 feet above that would be a Class 1 Division 2. So within 5 feet of the tank, within 5 feet of the dipping tank, is a Class 1 Division 1. Okay, 20 feet out horizontal would be a Class 1, 18 inches up, 3 feet off the ground, I'm sorry, is a Class 1 Division 2. 5 feet above the tank for the first 3 feet above that 5 feet. So say 8 feet above the tank, the first 5 feet is a Class 1 Division 1, the next 3 feet is a Class 1 Division 2, and all the way around. So it's where this comes in. Okay, once it's been dipped and leaves, once it gets to a certain point, this thing starts to dry, so you don't have to worry about it. So it's all dependent on the amount of hazardous material, the ventilation in the system, and the building design. So this is what determines what type of classifications you have. If it's properly ventilated, guess what? If you're going into a new area, guess what? All this is going to be taken care, be looked at as they get blueprints. You know, so a lot of times you got somebody that's, hey, we're going to do this, 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 this. Now you got to do it. Well, when you got to turn around and do these codes, is you have to remember is, what are the codes? Why, something happens because you use the wrong equipment, it's going to come back on you. I mean, they'll go on them because they did it illegally or whatever, but they'll come back on you because you didn't use it proper. Now you can be one liable because you didn't use the proper wiring methods. So that's for dipping tanks. Hazardous classification. So now we got spray booths. This is within a spray booth, and this is in an open area. So when we have an open area, it's where the spraying is being done is your Class 1 Division 1. That's that red spot. Okay, 20 feet, 10 feet above you. So you can say, wherever I'm spraying is a Class 1 Division 1. So let's say I get a 5-foot circle all the way around me. Outside that 5-foot circle, let's say outside that 5-foot circle of mine, it doesn't say here, it just says an open spray booth area, space extends 20 feet horizontally and 10 feet vertically from the space source or classified Division 1, Division Class 2. Okay, so now if you can see it like a dome all the way around me. 10 feet above me, 20 feet out both ways. 20 feet that way, 20 feet that way, 10 feet up. Above where I'm spraying. Above where I'm doing the spraying. Okay? So that's why it's showing it circle, 20 feet, 20 feet, and then 10 feet above you. So if I'm spraying here, 10 feet above here. Let's say you're that dome's, that 5-foot circle is you're that dome, and you get 10 feet above that, and 20 feet that way, and 20 feet that way, 20 feet that way, and 20 feet back behind you. Spray booths. If a spray booth is enclosed by partitions or walls without a roof, the distance is reduced accordingly. However, for a distance of 3 feet above the open roof, outside entrance, and the space is considered a Class 1 Division 1. So, if you have, this one is a spray booth or room. Again, if you have an open room, once you get above you. So, here, they're showing a door, a door, a door, and a door. So, this whole inside, it's considered a Class 1 Division 1. 3 feet outside this door is considered a Class 1 Division 2, okay, in a spray booth. So here's the door. The door itself is a Class 1 Division 1. It's all the way around, 3 feet all the way around. Here's the other one, so they're making the little dome, so you're seeing the side view and overhead view. So it's a Class 1 Division 1. If sprays performed within the fully enclosed booth with a roof, the space extend 3 feet in all directions from any opening is to be a Class 1 Division 2. The space within the enclosed spray booth or room is a Class 1 Division 1, Class 1 Zone 1, Class 1 wherever there's applicable. So if you have a room within a room and there's no spraying done, it can also change from a Class 1 Division 1 to a Class 1 Division 2. Wiring equipment. So all wiring methods and equipment installed within spray, dipping, and coating process must be suitable and approved for a Class 1 location. The wiring equipment must be installed as outlined under the provisions contained in Article 501, Class 1 location. Okay, so remember, this is all a Class 1. Class 1. What we're start doing in here is that the Class 1. These are all Class 1s. This has got to be rigid. It's got to be sealed, explosion proof. Not dust proof, explosion proof. And then it goes on to say particular attention must be paid to grounding, bonding, and providing conduit seals, fittings, wherever wiring enters or exits a hazardous area. Equipment must be within the hazard area, must be enclosed to prevent any arc sparks to escape. So when you're using here, always remember within a spray booth, Class 1 Division 1, so it's all got to be explosion proof. It's got to be enclosed. It's got to be rigid or IMC or mineral insulated cable. Once we get out here, we can change. When we get to a Class 1 Division 2, and that one is do a blank. It was one of the questions. MC cable, tray cable are permitted in a Division 1, Division 2, Class 1 Division 2. Again, so where you have what you got. There will be an assignment that is attached, that I'll attach it to this link for the video. Tomorrow I'll send out the test and the PDF, and the test and the PDF. So for today it would be this video and the assignment I send out. I'm going to need your review questions, the PDF, and the test, which I'll send out tomorrow. Monday is a holiday, I think. Monday's a holiday, so I send everything out tonight. You got to get it back into me either by Friday. I'll allow you to Tuesday morning. Okay, and then Tuesday we'll be starting on the next chapter. Next chapter is pools and fountains. Pools and fountains. Only got 2 more chapters left, and there's only 2 more weeks of school. Well, 3 weeks of school. 2 more weeks of this, and then I'm going to send you for the last week of school. I'll send you the final. The final is 150 questions. So I'll send it, and I'll give you a few days to take care of it because it's a doozy. So you just imagine a lot of the homework assignments that I gave you, some of the questions that are going to be on it. I think it's like 150 questions. Alright. Y'all have a good one. Stay safe.